Are you sure you know who you are? That the world around you is real? Your choices are yours. René Descartes decided to look at things differently and discarded everything he had ever believed. What he discovered afterward has the power to overturn your understanding of reality. For perhaps your entire life is a well-orchestrated illusion. And Descartes was right about almost everything. When René Descartes said in the 17th century, "To reach the truth, one must doubt everything at least once in one's life," he was not playing philosophical games. He was proposing a radical way to save thinking from lies, the lies we live in on a daily basis. His method of doubt is not just a philosophical tool, but a profound psychological challenge to our ego. After all, to doubt not the truth, but its appearance, is to refuse to believe in our own picture of the world. This is painful. It takes courage. It is destructive to the ego. One of the most paradoxical discoveries of philosophy and psychology is that what we call reality is just a model. Consciousness does not reveal the objective world to us. It constructs it. And in fact, we do not live in the world, but in an interface that our brain creates. Descartes foresaw this when he spoke of the unreliability of the senses. But today, science confirms that consciousness is the architect of the illusions you live in and become. Neurobiology says unequivocally, what you perceive is not the external world, but a neural simulation. Your eyes record light, your ears record air vibrations, your skin records pressure and temperature. All of this is raw data that the brain turns into a unified and survival-friendly model. Cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman calls this the user interface. Just as icons on a screen are not real files, the images of the world in the mind are not reality itself. Consequently, your reality is a metaphor created for the sake of survival, not truth. There is a truly frightening paradox here. Consciousness creates reality and then hides the fact of this construction. We don't see that we are living in an illusion because the illusion itself is designed so that we don't notice it. This can be called a cognitive trap or a mental prison. As Alan Watts said, "I'm hard to be fooled by anyone, but much easier to be fooled by myself." You are not living in the world. You are living in your model of the world. But forgetting this, you accept it as truth. This is the main danger. The illusion created by the brain becomes the only possible reality for you. Not only the outside world is an illusion, your self is also an illusion. The self you identify with is a set of automated concepts, social roles, memories, habitual reactions. Most of the time you are not acting as a free individual, but as a bio-robot inside a cognitive script. Erich Fromm called it escape from freedom. It is easier for a person to accept a ready-made model of himself and the world than to face the uncertainty of the present reality. Descartes understood this. His method of doubt destroyed not only the images of the external world, but also the construction of the inner self. Yes and no. It's impossible to escape completely, because any event is still something happening within consciousness. But realizing that you are within the construct gives you freedom within it. Like in a dream, if you realize that it is a dream, you get the opportunity to act consciously. Consciousness is not an enemy, but it's not a friend either. It's a tool that you have to be able to see, otherwise it becomes your jailer. In the 21st century, Descartes' philosophical thought takes on a new meaning. If you do not doubt reality, you are already a prisoner of your own psyche. Descartes does not suggest simply questioning individual ideas or facts. He speaks of total doubt, doubt at the very core of your experience, that the world exists at all and is not a dream or illusion, that your body is real, that your feelings are true, that your thoughts belong to you and are true in general. In other words, to doubt everything is to mentally dismantle the entire habitual interface of your psyche, to refuse to believe even your eyes and ears, to question the very reality of time, space, matter. This is similar to the experience of radical depersonalization, when consciousness looks at itself and asks, "Why do I believe I know anything at all?" Modern cognitive psychology confirms that our thinking is designed to protect our existing beliefs. Confirmation bias causes us to notice only what supports our views. We live in mental bubbles created by our own brains. These bubbles are comfortable. They create the illusion of knowledge. Descartes saw this even before the advent of neuroscience. The mind builds illusions faster than it can unmask them. Doubt, in Descartes' view, is not skepticism for skepticism's sake. It is a method of clearing away. As a surgeon cuts away infected tissue, so the mind, by doubting, cuts away false perceptions. It is destruction, rejection, emptying out that is the first step to pure thinking. His famous methodical doubt involves no faith in the senses or in habitual perceptions. Everything I have ever believed to be true has turned out to be false. Imagine for a moment that you would say that about your life. It's scary. Descartes taught that doubt is an act of inner honesty and freedom. It is the ability to say to oneself, "I don't know," and that is my strength. It is in recognizing our own ignorance that we begin to move beyond automatic reactions. As Montaigne said, "The man who knows that he knows nothing is already smarter than the man who thinks he knows everything." Descartes went deeper, not just not to know, but to consciously purge oneself of knowledge that one has not verified. When Descartes uttered the famous cogito ergo sum, "I think therefore I exist," he was not creating a new philosophical aphorism. He substantiated the one point at which reason cannot be deceived. After the radical doubt, only this fulcrum remained, the fact of thinking as an act. But what does this principle mean today, in a world of neuroscience, psychology, and virtual realities? Perhaps much more than it did in the 17th century. Modern man often identifies himself with the content of his thoughts. "I am what I think." But Descartes proposed a different idea. It doesn't matter what you think about. The very fact of thinking is proof of your existence. Not the substance, but the process itself. From a cognitive science perspective, this is paradoxical. The brain creates thoughts, but who or what realizes them? Descartes fixes. Since I doubt, there is something that produces the doubt. Even if everything around me is an illusion, even if I am dreaming or being deceived by an evil genius, the fact of doubt is irrefutable. Thus, the self is not a set of thoughts, but the very act of awareness. In today's world of external images, social roles, and other people's opinions, returning to the cogito becomes a way to find inner freedom. This is the point at which you are not defined by the opinion of your parents, the dictates of social networks, or cultural standards. You are in primary awareness. I am, because I am aware that I am. Psychotherapy, especially existential and transpersonal, uses a similar principle, a return to the basic I am, as a way to regain control of one's own life. By discarding all concepts, one can come to the level of pure presence. In this sense, cogito is not a thought of self, but a direct knowledge of the fact of being. The practices and meditations actually lead to the same discovery as Descartes. Behind the flow of thoughts, there is pure awareness, inherent and indubitable. The difference is that Descartes arrived at this logically, while the meditative practices arrived at it phenomenologically. But the conclusion is the same. Consciousness is not a content, but a space of presence. In the 21st century, when artificial intelligence generates thoughts and texts, and virtual images create false identities, Descartes' thought takes on new meaning. Perhaps the only thing that distinguishes us from artificial systems is the presence of subjective awareness of the act of thinking. Even if all my thoughts are false, the very fact that I am aware that I am thinking remains undeniable. If you think you know who you are, it's a delusion. The inner self you are used to is just a construct. Descartes was the beginning of the realization that our self is not something self-evident. But this was later revealed more deeply in Lacan's philosophy, in Jung's psychology, in Zen Buddhism. What you call yourself is a performance. You are both actor and spectator within it. Social psychology calls this impression management. Depending on the situation, we put on different masks. With colleagues, you are one. With loved ones, another. With yourself, a third. But it's deeper than that. You don't have a true face behind these masks. You are the sum total of all these roles. Irving Goffman wrote in his book, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, "Life is a stage on which we do not play a part, but become one." In other words, when you play the mask, you don't realize that you've stopped being someone outside of the game. You have become a role. Thinking automatically forms an image of the self to maintain integrity. This image is made up of social expectations, who others think you are, childhood memories and stories, who you were taught to be, evaluative judgments, who you want yourself to be. But it's all a mental construct. You're not there as a subject. There's a set of stories and reactions. Jacques Lacan called it the imaginer ego, an illusory reflection in which the subject does not find himself, but with which he identifies. In fact, you live inside an imaginary double. Zen Buddhism makes the same point. There is a small self that is automatic, self-centered, clinging to images and evaluations. This self is the source of fear and suffering. Why? Because it is fragile. It is afraid of being exposed, forgotten, rejected. Psychotherapist D. Winnicott spoke of the false self as a protective image that a person creates to adapt to the demands of others. But if this image becomes the basis of the personality, a break from the true experience of life begins. In everyday life, it manifests itself in this way. You take your thoughts as your own. You think emotions are proof of truth. You believe in stories about yourself made up long ago. As a result, one lives as an actor who has forgotten what he is playing. And this performance seems to be reality. Descartes proposed doubt as a method of knowledge, but today we can go further, to use doubt as a method of living, not for philosophical exercises, but for liberation. After all, it is thoughts, images, concepts, and the ego that become the cage in which we live. Therefore, The ability to doubt is not just an intellectual skill. It is an inner path to freedom. Every time you realize that your thought is a hypothesis and not a fact, you expand the space of inner freedom. You are no longer hostage to automatic reactions. Descartes didn't doubt for the sake of skepticism. He doubted for the sake of purification. That's the essence of the method. Not to destroy, but to clear the way to true vision. The practice of doubt as a way of life. Stop. Feel what's going on in your mind right now. What images, thoughts, evaluations are working there? Ask, why do I believe this? Who put this in me? Where does this knowledge come from? Question the automatic. Anything that seems obvious is most often an illusion. Remain in ignorance. It is difficult, but it is what is liberating. This is where doubt turns into awareness. Every moment can be lived not as an automatic reaction, but as pure experience. You look at reality without identifying with thoughts. The most important thing is to question the image you have of yourself. Every time the mind says, I am this or that, you can ask, who is claiming this? Why should I believe this voice? Descartes showed that after the destruction of all concepts, only I am thinking remains. But today we can go a step further. I am not thoughts. I am not images of myself. I am presence itself. I am the space of awareness. That is the way out of the cognitive prison. It's not about finding a new definition of yourself. It is to stop believing in any definition. Paradoxically, it is doubt that leads to inner peace. Liberation comes not when you convince yourself of something new, but when you stop clinging to the old. Descartes originated intellectual doubt, but you can turn it into psychological freedom. I don't know what I am, but I definitely am. And that's enough. In this way, doubt ceases to be a threat. It becomes a practice of inner stillness and clarity. That's what Descartes was right about, and the rest is probably a lie. But it is through this false one that we perhaps come to our real selves.